Hello, and welcome to the Being Human podcast, where we explore what it means to be human, physically, mentally, and spiritually. We upload an episode of this podcast every single week, so whether you're new here or if you're returning and you have not yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That is the best way you can help support the podcast, and it also ensures you do not miss any of these episodes. On this episode of the podcast, I sat down with Jake Miner. Jake is a metabolic health coach, focusing in particular on metabolic eating. Metabolic health can be defined as our body's ability to efficiently create, store, and utilize energy. Metabolic eating is all about minimizing stress in the body and maximizing our energy. I'll let Jake delve into the principles and protocols in the episode itself, but to give you a preface, some of what Jake's going to talk about is going to be controversial to the mainstream dogma when it comes to nutrition and health in general. All I can say is I've tried many of the metabolic eating processes that Jake advocates for and is a proponent of. And from my experience, every one of the principles and protocols I've tried has benefited me greatly. The fact is, we live in a world today where our bodies are constantly under stress, and not necessarily quote unquote good stress. There are so many toxins in our environment. Daily life, modern living is stressful in a way our evolution is not really equipped to deal with. Therefore, metabolic eating, or the thermogenic diet as it's also known, can be really helpful in basically resetting our bodies, diminishing the stress in our bodies, getting our body in a place where it is able to really create, utilize, store energy efficiently, as I said, get us back thriving and keep us thriving. Metabolic eating really focuses on optimizing our thyroid function, maximizing our testosterone, focusing on getting our hormones in check where they need to be so we have boundless vitality and can do whatever we want to in our day-to-day lives. I hope you find as much value in this episode as I did. If you do, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below, share it around on social media, hit that subscribe button as well. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rate the show 5 stars, hit that follow button as well. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting Being Human. The Being Human podcast is brought to you by health.com. Health brings you all the best supplements from across the globe, everything you need to get and keep yourself thriving. One of my favourite supplements from Health that I've been using every day recently are these magnesium trace mineral drops. I've been starting and ending my day every day with these for the past few weeks, and it has me feeling amazing. I'm sleeping great, I've got great energy throughout the day. You'll hear Jake tell you about the importance of getting enough magnesium in your diet for your metabolic health. All you need to do to pick up some of these ionic magnesium drops or another supplement from Health is to head to health.com, that's HEALF.com, and go /Aaron Wagley to get 10% off your order. That's ARUNWAGLE to get 10% off your order. So, Jake, if you could start off, please, by telling me how you came to discover metabolic eating, the thermogenic diet, Dr. Ray Peat's work. What's your background in all of this? What's your personal story to it?
Yeah, so my personal story started maybe 10, 11 years ago. I was going through a breakup with my fiance, and we just had a kid. So when everybody generally goes into these big breakups, you want to look good, you want to get big, you want to get shredded, that kind of stuff. So I ended up going to a place called Complete Nutrition, similar to like a GNC, like health and supplement store. And the guys there recommended I get on a product called Hardcore Bulk. So this product, and I had no idea about metabolic health at the time. I just wanted to get big. Big mistake, but it led me here. So I started with the Hardcore Bulk, maybe 2 weeks into it, 3 capsules a day. And all it said, it was a big proprietary blend on the back. Didn't tell you what it was. So maybe by week 4, I was putting on size, maybe 6-7 pounds. I felt stronger. But then my libido tanked. It was completely gone. So at that point, I go back up to Complete Nutrition and talk to the guys in there. I'm like, what is going on? And they gave me some spiel about inflammation, take these fish oils. So then at that point, I had no idea again. I started taking 12 fish oils a day, 20 fish oils a day, 3 different types of capsules from Complete Nutrition. Then a couple more weeks went on, and my mindset was off. I started getting cold hands and feet. So I go back into the Complete Nutrition store. I'm like, hey guys, what's the problem? You told me to do this. You guys are the experts. I'm just following exactly what you said, and my health keeps getting worse. Pretty pissed off at this point. And then one of the guys says, well, you might be estrogen dominant. We want you to take this aromatase inhibitor. This is going to lower your estrogen. So again, I start on an aromatase inhibitor, just over the counter from Complete Nutrition, taking fish oils, which is a terrible idea, and then a hardcore bulk, which just shows a proprietary blend of stuff I couldn't even read. The names were so big, I had no idea what it was. So a couple months went on, health kept getting worse, and I started developing lumps in my chest area. Then I started kind of freaking out. I ran back up there panicking, yelling at the guys, and they ended up kind of kicking me out of the store. So from that point, I went to the doctor, and they wanted to do a biopsy. It had like 4 lumps in my chest around my nipple area. I had no idea. So I'm in the doctor's office, like, well, we can biopsy, see if it's something we need to cut out, or if you just want to get them cut out, we can set that up, yada, yada, yada. And I didn't have an answer. I was, again, more mad, more pissed off at that point. So then I turned to the internet, like black market, like websites. This is so many years ago where there wasn't, you couldn't just get on like an anabolic steroid Facebook group or with guys like that. They were kind of shutting their band. And I wanted to see what was going on. So it led me to that. And when I got on these websites, all the guys were telling me, you know, it's gyno or it's just estrogen buildup. Cut it out, get on some real gear. And then I had to steer away from that platform and that kind of idea. So the doctors didn't work. The anabolic guys had no answers. And then I turned to trying a vegan diet. So I did that for 2-3 months. Health got worse. I was extremely cold, wasn't sleeping through the night. And then I went to keto, and then I went to carnivore. And every time I made these big changes, I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then maybe I would say year and a half into it, you know, I'm just depressed, bummed out, thinking I have cancer. I couldn't find an answer. Through research, studies, doctors, groups, people's influences, could not find the answer. So then one day I was sitting on YouTube scrolling for answers. You know, maybe I can find something on a video. And I found the work of Christopher Walker. So Christopher Walker had a video on big nuts, so big testicles. And I was like, what is this? So I clicked on it. And I immediately messaged Chris after I watched the video on his YouTube post. And I'm like, Chris, this is my problem. I don't know you. Like, you got some kind of answers? Then he responded, well, I know what to do. And right away I was like, you know what, Chris, fuck you. I don't know you. Nobody's helping me. I'm desperate, but I'll try anything. So at that point, Chris and I were going back and forth. And he's like, Jake, I'm coming out with this string of videos, you know, based on, you know, optimizing testosterone, optimizing health, that kind of stuff. Just dive in and we'll go back and forth on all these questions. So Chris came out with these videos, you know, in the next 2 weeks, there's 40 videos to watch, and I couldn't stop watching them. And I kept going back and forth with Chris on Gmail and on his videos. And after a couple months of that, I finally started to feel better. So this was 2 years of spiraling. And I kind of felt like I was on the right track. You know, I'm having some, I started getting warmer hands and feet. My libido started to come back just a little bit. And that was a huge win because for 2 years, nothing. So at that point, Chris and I became kind of friends, but we didn't know each other at that point. And he had a supplement company. I started taking some of his supplements, started diving into the world of his stuff. And then Chris, at that point, was a world-renowned testosterone optimizer. So he had a pituitary tumor. It was basically blocking the pituitary axis, so his hormones weren't shooting the testes where all the magic can happen to make testosterone. So his testosterone was at 11 nanograms per deciliter. He got it all the way to 1189 nanograms per deciliter. So I started diving into Chris's world. And then after about a year of that, he was coming up with newer videos on like metabolic health. Because through Chris's research, he found out that when you concentrate on optimizing your testosterone, you're also doing everything kind of in the metabolic world the same. So then he kind of fell in love with the metabolic world. So Chris at that point started coming up with something called the thermo diet. It's just a repeat metabolic-based diet. And Chris reached back out. He's like, hey, Jake, we're going to start this Facebook group. You know, I really like your knowledge. I like your journey. I want you in the group and interact with some people. So I was pumped to do it. I was feeling better, not healed or nothing like that yet. And then I got in this group. I was interacting with people, answering 50, 60 questions a day. And I kind of took off in there. Like, people knew who I was. Chris loved the comments, and I was helping these people just from the stuff I learned from Chris. But about 3-4 months into that, Chris had an old video he shared with me with Tim Berzins. Tim Berzins is a super repeater guy. He doesn't coach anymore right now, but he has a channel called Amplified Vitality. So Chris and Tim did this video about metabolism, and it blew me away because it aligned with Chris's like testosterone stuff issues I had, but then it got more like into the nitty gritty, and it all clicked in my head. I'm like, no way. So then I dove into Ray Peat, and once I found the world of Ray Peat, bioenergetics, biochemistry, that kind of stuff, I was so hooked, and I basically healed myself, from my knowledge and the stuff I learned from Chris. And 6 months into it, I was so passionate about, hey, I got rid of these lumps in my chest. I brought my testosterone from 206. Fast forward a couple years, 4, 5, 6 years later, I was sitting at 1,323 nanograms per deciliter. Now, Chris's 1,100 is pretty high, but 13's like world renowned. So, sorry, Chris, but my testosterone's higher than yours. And then when I started, you could see the physical difference in me. My mental state was different, happy, hungry, horny, this vibrant, state of being. It was resonating with everybody. So at that point, Chris was like, hey, we need you on the team. Move to this state and work for me. And I was, I have a son that I share with his mother, so I couldn't do that. So I was so bummed. I'm like, man, I got to this point where, I can do this. I'm helping people with this, and I love it, and I can teach it and preach it for a living. So many people in life, how many people do you know that get to do what they love for a living? Maybe 1%, not even. So I was pretty bummed at that point. A couple months went by. I kept doing my thing, helping people in the group, diving into more Ray Peat stuff, getting better at it. Every single day I was hooked. So then a couple months go by, and I get an email saying, hey, pick your hours. Here's this much time off. You can work any time of day, blah, blah, blah. And they offered me a job. So at that point, that went on for about four or 5 more years. And then this thermodiet group was huge. My presence in the metabolic community was huge. We were doing podcasts. It was awesome. I felt like for the first time in my life, I was right where I belong, teaching people metabolic health, helping people with, X amount of problems and healing them from the root cause. And I had the ability to do that. And over those 4 or 5 years working with Chris, I just got better and better and better and better. Now, this last March, I ended up starting my own metabolic coaching company. So now I do one-on-one coaching myself. And I get to work with people all over the world and help solve their problems. And I absolutely love it. So that's kind of where my journey started with, going through a breakup. Men and women out there, you go through a bad breakup, you're like, hey, I want to get the best looking I can get. You want to get fit, you want to get jacked, whether it's to make somebody jealous or just be a better version of yourself because you were in a struggling relationship or bummed out, that kind of stuff. And it led to, helping 10,000 people plus now in the last 8 or 9 years and having my own coaching company.
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest catalysts for change in our life are relationships breaking up, or rather breaking down, and people passing away. Whenever that happens in a significant way in our lives, significant change tends to follow it. Before we go into the details of all of this, if you could give me kind of 3 high-level, succinct definitions, please, Jake, to metabolic health. What do we mean when we talk about metabolic health? The thermodiet. What is the thermodiet, and who is Dr. Ray Peat?
Yeah, so when it comes to metabolic health, it's characterized by the body's ability to efficiently produce and utilize energy. So when you're in this state where you're stressed out, you have a bunch of micronutrient deficiencies, estrogen dominance, you name it, all these problems, you're not producing energy and or storing it efficiently. And one of the biggest problems I see, in the day and age we live in, you're not taking your food and you're not converted to energy. Your stress hormones are high, thyroid production's low. So getting to this point where you're doing this, you're supporting thyroid production. So if you're efficiently utilizing energy and allowing your body to store it, your thyroid production is on point. Now, when your thyroid production is on point, that's your body's master regulator. So you get to that point where you're physically, mentally, emotionally, and even financially, this like optimal state of yourself. You can't do that without this high energy flow through the cells. And the thermodiet is basically metabolic Ray Peat diet. I don't work anymore, but I was the thermal warrior for a long time, and I love it. So, when you break down a metabolic diet or thermodiet, you're eating things that support the energy flow. So there's all kinds of things out there: seeds, grains, nuts, beans, cruciferous vegetables, tap water. Those are very inflammatory. They throw off your thyroid, your body's master regulator. They spike your stress hormones. They block your blood sugar balance. So if you can eat to essentially support your biochemistry, you'll be in this optimal state, an optimal metabolic state. And that's another thing that is not talked about enough, in the influencer world, the fitness world, the health world. Our biochemistry works one way. You can't hack your biochemistry. You can't change the way it works. So you can live this whole lifestyle that supports energy production and supports your biochemistry. Or, you can be stressed out, cold hands and feet. You can be that guy in the gym where you've been training for 4 years, you're drinking 3 gallons of tap water, and you look at pictures 3 years ago and you're the same size. So you want to grow, you want to be a different person, you want to be this optimal version of yourself, and you need to support your biochemistry, and the metabolic eating just strictly supports biochemistry. So in a sense, when people get to the metabolic health coaching, you're eating McDonald's, intermittent fasting, endurance training, that kind of stuff. You're not supporting energy production, thyroid. You're stressing it out. So you're not living this lifestyle to support biochemistry. Now, once you switch to this lifestyle, hey, I'm not eating McDonald's. I'm not doing this. I'm eating mineral dense foods. You're doing, 400 things in everyday life without even knowing it. That's causing 700 problems. Now, when you switch to the metabolic style of eating, you have 6 problems to concentrate on because you just X'd out 700. And then you just work on one root cause, then the next root cause, then the next root cause. Then your energy flow increases. Then you're this vibrant, beautiful, happy, hungry, horny version of yourself. So, and who is Dr. Ray Peat? So that's a good question. Dr. Ray Peat is probably the most influential mind, I would say, that might have ever existed to man, whether it's, mathematics, linguistics, history, health, everything. Ray was an absolute savant from age 2, to the day he died. So what Ray Peat did is, for 60 plus years, being this absolute non-authoritarian savant, put this beautiful picture together for us, so we can live life optimally, have this optimal way of eating, optimal lifestyle that supports energy production, energy utilization, thyroid production. He did that for years and years and years, to the point where just me diving into his research, I've helped over 10,000 people. So Ray has done so much. He's a professor in all these different things. He opened up his own college in Mexico. He took like the best minds in the world that aligned with him, started his own college, and he's been doing this. And one of the biggest differences, besides Ray's like extreme knowledge and like savant type knowledge and stuff, he did all this for free. So that's another thing where the metabolic health kind of, when I talk about doing it for free, when you look at all these influencers and, what are the biggest things that bother us? Convenience really killed us. So a microwave, not making your food, packaged food, not getting up and doing things, not spending time outside doing the things you used to do. And then also, Ray doesn't charge $1, that kind of thing.
The Being Human podcast is brought to you by Ra Optics. Ra Optics are the best blue blocker glasses on the market. As someone who unfortunately has to stare into a screen all day, every day, like so many of us, these have been a game changer. They've really helped me to keep my focus and mood elevated. They've helped me minimize eye strain, minimize headaches, so I can be as productive as possible throughout the day. And if my work does extend into the evening, then I switch over to these evening lenses to really minimize that blue light intake to ensure I do not disrupt my sleep. If you want to really dial in your circadian rhythms, really maximize your productivity throughout the day, then pick up a set of Ra Optics daylight and evening lenses by heading to raoptics.com and go /waglele to get 10% off your order. That's Ra Optics, raoptics.com /waglele, WAGLELE, to pick up your set and get 10% off your order.
Your metabolic health is your health pertaining to your ability to produce energy and store it and then utilize it in an efficient way. The thermogenic diet or metabolic eating is eating to promote your metabolic health, so minimizing inflammation through the foods that you take in your diet. And Dr. Ray Peat is the genius, the savant, I like that word, savant, that created this diet, and really was the kind of not patient's hero, but it's from him that people like yourself, Christopher Walker, have all kind of sprouted from and come to preach and share the ways of metabolic eating. So let's go into the actual mechanisms of it. You mentioned nuts, seeds, grains, vegetables. These are inflammatory foods. Now, that will sound like a controversial thing to many people. I think let's go into this. A lot of people, right, won't have a problem with that inflammation. And a lot of people will say it can actually be good for people, right, to have that hormetic response. It's kind of like exercising. Exercising is a stress on the body, but it's a good stress. Your body adapts to that stress and becomes stronger. And I think that's obviously the case for a lot of people. But then some people have a real problem with this inflammation that they're getting from eating vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. So if you could go into that a bit more, please, Jake, and then obviously that's the group of foods that we're looking to avoid when it comes to the thermogenic diet. What foods are we focusing on consuming then instead?
Yeah, so when it comes to these things I'm talking about, let's say seeds, for example. Now, when you plant a seed for, let's say, a pine tree, you want to plant a seed on your property. You plant that seed in the ground, and it's filled with phytic acid. So the phytic acid is in the soil, and it grabs the minerals, and it grows a tree. Now, when you consume seeds, grains, nuts, beans, cruciferous vegetables, they're all packed with phytic acid. Now, minerals are the building blocks to our health. So if you don't have minerals, you can't perform all these enzymatic reactions in your body. So essentially, when you eat seeds, you're grabbing your magnesium, you're shitting it out. And this happens with all the mineral chelators you're eating. So same thing with grains. Another thing with all these lists of stuff we're talking about is most of these things are seeds, grains, nuts, beans. They're also packed with polyunsaturated fats. And we'll get into more of that topic, later in the podcast. But, when you're eating something that chelates your minerals, you're actually, let's say, take magnesium, for example. Now, magnesium is required for pyruvate dehydrogenase. So that's a big term for, the utilization of your sugar, or you can look at it as like a big highway where your energy flow goes through. Now, you need magnesium to combine with pyruvate dehydrogenase in order for you to use it. So if you're, not eating a metabolic diet, which is very mineral dense, you don't even have enough magnesium to combine with pyruvate dehydrogenase. So you could argue you're really not using your sugar, and the mineral chelators are making it worse. Another thing that's important, I guess heavy hitter enzymatic reaction is your ATP. Now that's talked about till we're blue in the face in the influencer realm, training, that kind of stuff. Well, your ATP also requires a magnesium molecule to combine with it to carry it into your thyroid in order to use it. So then also another big topic, hormone production, testosterone. You eat food and you store liver glycogen, excess glycogen, and you export it as cholesterol. Well, when it gets exported, it just sits there. So you need magnesium to combine with cholesterol to carry it inside your mitochondria in this mother pool of hormones called pregnenolone to make testosterone. Also, even with your vitamin D, a lot of people will take like a D3 till they're blue in the face because they're in the UK and there's not a lot of sun. But again, you need that magnesium to combine with vitamin D in order for your body to use it. So minerals are the building blocks to life. So, contrary to one's belief, seeds are not heart healthy, and seeds are packed with mineral chelators. So when you do this, you got to keep in mind that magnesium's first and second, reaction that it's going to take care of is if you tear your rotator cuff, you're going to bring the magnesium there to bring down inflammation, right? So, or if you have like psychological stress and injury, that kind of stuff, inflammation from something you ate, magnesium gets shuttled there to bring down the inflammation. Now, if you're not eating enough magnesium, you don't have this super store of magnesium, there's no way you have enough magnesium for the inflammation, the injury, and then binding with pyruvate dehydrogenase, binding with ATP, binding with cholesterol. You're not having these processes. And then essentially when we talked about, what is metabolic health, it's that energy flow. Now you're extremely inhibiting that energy flow by chelating the minerals, not having enough for inflammation, not having enough to bring on like an injury inflammation. And then you're not using your sugar, you're not using your energy, and you're not making testosterone as a man. That's where you feel depressed. You're not putting on weight in the gym, and your just energy flow is just tanking. So I guess what was one of the other ones? Cruciferous vegetables. Similar to same thing. This is a big one in the bodybuilding world, or vegans or boys and girls, eat your vegetables, they're healthy for you. Now, vegetables that grow on top of the soil and not a root vegetable like in the metabolic world, they develop toxins. So things like rabbits, deer won't eat them. So the worst thing that's in cruciferous vegetables is the cellulose in the stem wall. So when you think of like a ruminant animal, like a cow, they have a whole stomach that's designed to break down the cellulose from the grass, efficiently. Humans cannot break down cellulose in our gut. So if you're one of them guys, not you, but if you guys are watching this and you're eating a bunch of broccoli all day long, 3-4 cups of broccoli, cruciferous vegetable meals, that cellulose is fermenting in your gut, and then it's turning into endotoxin. The more endotoxin you have, the higher serotonin gets. Then when serotonin spikes, so does cortisol, adrenaline, prolactin, cortisol. These things, it's one big chain. So that's why this is so damaging to your energy flow, thyroid production, seeds, grains, nuts, beans. There's also goitrogens in things like cruciferous vegetables, kale. A lot of people eat kale and think it's healthy. Well, goitrogens actually block your thyroid production. So going back to Ray Peat's big, broad spectrum, he points all this stuff out, but then he breaks down in detail. And then what you find is from when implementing these stuff and or avoiding these stuff, metabolic rate goes up, morning temp goes up, waking body temp goes up, testosterone production goes up. Then your problems start to slowly go away.
You spoke about the importance of magnesium there. And magnesium is a mineral that's notoriously difficult for most people to get into their diet in the requisite amounts without supplementation. What are like your go-to sources, your natural whole food sources for magnesium?
Yeah, so when we think of the metabolic diet, things like orange juice, grass-fed milk, shellfish, root vegetables, those kind of things are absolutely packed with magnesium. But again, even at the level I'm at, very optimal level, I still like to supplement with Georgi Dinkov's Magn Oil. It's topical; it goes right in the blood. That's another problem with a lot of the supplements, and I'm not going to say all of them, but when you have too much stuff going on in the gut and you take a supplement orally, that supplement has to make it through your stomach acid, then go through the bloodstream, and then reroute back through the liver and then back through the bloodstream. Now, supplements are made knowing that process, but you see some people, hey, Jake said I need more magnesium, so let's take 800 milligrams of magnesium glycinate. Well, that will act as a stool softener, and how much are you absorbing? Because it's just binding with the stool and you're kind of shitting out. So when I recommend supplements, I do recommend some capsules and stuff, but topical supplements, our skin is the number one biggest organ in the body. It's our number one absorbent. So I like a topical, magnesium, Magn Oil from ideallabs.com. That's George Dinkov. Now, when you think about these processes, using the sugar, ATP, testosterone, I actually like to take the Magn Oil pre-workout, because if I'm, using my energy, appropriately, boosting my testosterone, keeping stuff in check, I feel way more athletic pre-workout, and it's not a requirement. And then I'll actually take it again before bed, down to regulate inflammation, calm the system down, sleep better, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Obviously, magnesium is spoke of as like one of your 3 key electrolytes, right? Sodium, potassium, magnesium. So you're saying you like to take it topically when you take it as a supplement, and then your whole food sources are your orange juice, grass-fed milk, and shellfish predominantly.
Yep, and all the root vegetables are packed with magnesium. They're packed with all kinds of minerals because remember, the roots are in the soil. So opposite of the phytic acid.
Okay,
but yeah.
So when we're talking root vegetables, we're talking Swedes, butternut squash, potato.
Yep, rutabaga, everything. Everything that's a root vegetable is really high in minerals. Like even, when you think of the potato, potatoes are so mineral dense that when you leave a potato in the cupboard, what does it do? It's so filled with nutrients, it sprouts more potatoes, even outside of its environment. So yeah, potatoes are an actually absolutely mineral dense thing to consume.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people will be glad to hear that. We'll go into what oil you should be cooking those potatoes in a bit later on in the conversation. But to circle back to the question I asked a few minutes ago, what are the main foods we're focusing on consuming in the thermo diet to promote
Yeah,
metabolic health?
Yeah, the metabolic health. Yeah, so we want to obviously consume really dense foods, really micronutrient, really dense, mineral dense foods, packed with micronutrients. So some of my favorite foods are easy to digest fruit. So fruit packed with a bunch of micronutrients, a bunch of fructose, antioxidants. So again, when we talked about in the beginning, supporting energy production, allowing this, eating these foods, it will further support energy production. Another thing we see a lot in the metabolic community is people are scared to pound a bunch of orange juice or eat a lot of fruit because they think it's going to make them fat. But when it comes to, getting that insulin spike you need, in order for glucose to go uptake into the cell with something like a big bowl of rice, the fructose actually bypasses that insulin spike and metabolizes through the liver. So then other heavy hitter foods, orange juice, fruits, all shellfish. So shellfish sit in the ocean and they're absorbing the trace minerals. Now, all those trace minerals, selenium, copper, zinc, they support thyroid production. So shellfish, organ meats, when you think of the organs, 1,000 years ago, all the elitists and kings and pharaohs and all that kind of stuff, they ate just the organ meats and they gave the slaves, the filet mignon. Filet mignon wasn't popular because they're so dense in minerals and nutrients, organs, liver especially. Even when it comes to something like the wild animals, you look at like a pack of timber wolves in the United States, they'll make a kill and the alpha comes along and eats the liver. Same thing with, the lions in the savannah. All the female lions do all the killing and here comes the male, the head alpha, and he eats this huge liver and they won't touch it. It's because it's so mineral dense and they want to produce beautiful, healthy, long living offspring. Other things, we talked about shellfish, oysters are great. Other carbohydrate sources, potatoes are great. Make sure we're cooking them well. Rice is okay as long as you can handle them. Some people in a low energy state have a difficult time breaking down the starches. So like on a metabolic or a biochemistry level, the starch molecule is about this big and the gap it's got to fit through is about that. So I do see that a lot with people switching from, something like keto and they just can't even handle glucose and they're really stressed state. And then when you heal, you can do things like starches. Other things, sourdough, gelatinous protein sources. So gelatin, one broth collagen, those are great too. They're packed with anti-stress amino acids, proline and glycine. And those, again, all support bringing down inflammation, increasing energy flow. Other things I like too is, I guess what I like to eat. I'll get up and do a Coach Jake shake. Again, packed with minerals, packed with vitamins, hormones, nutrients, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do like 3 to 4 cups of 1% grass-fed milk, 3 raw egg yolks. So egg yolks are also considered nature's multivitamin. So egg yolks are absolutely packed with just about everything you need. So I'll do 3 raw egg yolks, 2 scoops of honey. Now, honey is another multifaceted tool, cleans out the gut, helps you live forever, provides a bunch of fructose. Honey is an absolute superfood. And then I'll put a scoop of collagen in there. And then I'll do 1 ounce of grass-fed raw liver. So when I get up in the morning, you fast all night. That's why they call it breakfast break fast. What happens is when you get up, your cortisol spikes. So you want to hit your system with a bunch of nutrients right away in the morning. Then you kind of feel your day, mindset's on point, stress is low, inflammation is low. So I like to do that. And then I guess an hour or two later, I'll do a raw carrot salad. I don't know if you want me to get into the nitty gritty about a raw carrot salad. Yeah. So
please, go into that because the raw carrot salad, is something which I know has been massively helpful for a lot of people detoxing, getting those endotoxins out of their gut. It's a key part to the process, I think, because part of it is filling your body with the minerals, the nutrients it needs. The other part of it is getting out all of that shit that it needs to in order for those nutrients to do their job. So if you could go into the thinking behind the raw carrot salad and what goes into it and how it works, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so when it comes to the raw carrot salad, or the carrot itself, the root vegetable again, so inside the raw carrot salad, there's an indigestible fiber. So what this fiber is doing is it's acting as a Brillo pad and scraping along your intestinal wall. And inside there's a bunch of buildup of endotoxin, stress, estrogen, all this stuff, and it basically scrapes it out. Now, when you add in something like white wine vinegar, coconut oil, they're antimicrobial, antifungal, antibacterial, antiviral, antiestrogenic, antiserotonergic. So what you're doing is essentially scraping up years of built up gunk and stress and all these things I just mentioned. And when that happens, you're really dumping your estrogen stores, serotonin stores. When I was in that estrogen dominant state and I had 11 lumps in my chest and I did my first carrot salad, 10 minutes later, I was giggling because it dumped my estrogen so much. Now, another one of the big, value points of the carrot salad is once you can clean out your gut, you really relieve the stress on the liver. Now, the liver is one of the only or main things that in our body is dealing with all the stress, physical, chemical, emotional stress, and it's got to deal with the burden of all that. Now, inside your liver, you have inactive T4 and active T3. So 94% of your thyroid hormone is done in your liver. Now, when your gut's all stressed out, you're further stressing the liver out, and a lot of times it hinders that thyroid production, or conversion. So once you get that out of there, you're essentially tanking your stress hormones, and you're really skyrocketing your thyroid hormone production. So it's such a heavy hitter. I've had 5,000 people absolutely love the carrot salad. People that are estrogen dominant or low thyroid function, or they just have ongoing gut issues for years and years and years. If you can scrape that out like a Brillo pad and get rid of that stuff and have a sterile, digestive tract, it's multifaceted and, beneficial, excuse me.
So yeah, we're talking about something as simple as just raw carrots, ideally grated or shredded, right?
Yeah. So,
kind of give it a bigger surface area to work with. I've heard that mechanism talked about before. Is that right?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So when you shred it the long way, the fiber is actually like that. So when you're shredding it the long way, it scrapes better. Now, if you don't have time and you're just going to eat a carrot, make sure you chew it well. It's still going to be effective. Just to get the best bang for your buck, you want to shred it the long way. A teaspoon of white wine vinegar, a teaspoon of coconut oil, mix it all up and eat it. And then it's also important to eat it on an empty stomach, because I have some clients that'll have it on my metabolic routine list for them, and they'll put their carrots in a smoothie. They're like, Coach Jake, I did my carrot salad today, but I put it in a smoothie. Well, you added a bunch of cool nutrient-dense foods, but now it's in the way of that Brillo pad scraping effect. So make sure you're hungry when you're going to eat a carrot salad, and then after you eat it, while you're eating it, chew it well, and then for another 30 minutes, let the carrot do its thing in your digestive tract before you eat some more food and get in the way of it.
Awesome. I think that's a really low cost tool for people to use if they're looking, because everyone's looking to detox, right? We hear about all these toxins in our environment, they're abundant, and it can be so difficult to work out where to start. There's so many expensive detoxing treatments. Some are more effective than others, but yeah, get a few carrots, grate them up, peel them long ways, scoop of coconut oil, white wine vinegar on an empty stomach, and that will do wonders for a lot of people, right? That will do a great deal of good. Circling back to some of the other foods, you put the emphasis on organ meats. I'm always preaching about the importance of organ meats, giving it, especially liver, giving us the minerals that we don't usually get from muscle meats. Where do muscle meats come into the equation? So when we talk about muscle meats, we're talking about your traditional, anything from steak to chicken breast to pork loins, the actual normal meats that people eat that aren't organs. Where do they come in? What are your preferred sources of muscle meats to eat? Do you steer clear of an animal such as pork? Do you still steer clear of chicken? What are your go-tos on that side of things? Sorry.
Yeah. So when it comes to muscle meats, the problem with, when it comes to aligning that with your metabolic health, they're high in cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan. Now, you hear it till you're blue in the face about essential amino acids. They are essential. We need them for some things, but an abundance of cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan are precursors to serotonin. So again, going back to the bodybuilder diet, bunch of broccoli, bunch of turkey, chicken breasts, you're in this inflammatory state. Now, eating metabolically, we're avoiding things like the things that are high in cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan. Now, when I want to eat something, I do eat steaks. I love steaks, but as opposed to a turkey breast, as opposed to a steak, you're getting a bunch of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, all this stuff. But in a turkey breast, you're essentially just getting a ton of cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan, which is inflammatory. So if I'm going to eat, muscle meats, I like to do, lamb, steak, ruminant animals like that, oxtails, those are good as well. And then I guess while we're on the topic of the cysteine, methionine, and tryptophan, another thing that people don't talk about or don't know about that's even higher in these 3 amino acids is egg whites. So going back to the bodybuilder diet again, a lot of people, hey, they get the carton of eggs or the carton of egg whites and they eat that and throw out the yolks. Well, earlier in the podcast, I said the yolks are, nature's multivitamin. So one of the issues, again, going back to the muscle meats and the inflammatory amino acids, cysteine, methionine, tryptophan are packed in egg whites. So that's a big negative when it comes to egg whites. Also, going back to the metabolic theory of health. So when it comes to the egg white protein, it's super hard to break down. It's the most dense protein there is. So in your body, when you eat it and ingest it, break it down, your body gets such a high insulin spike that it uses up the glucose you have and causes your blood sugar balance to go off. And then another thing, going into the egg whites is egg whites actually block biotin, B7 absorption. And biotin is a direct precursor to testosterone. So, you see it every day in the world where people can't handle eggs. And generally, it's not that you're allergic. Even if it says you're allergic, your stomach will drop because you're getting this extreme insulin spike. And then you don't even have enough glucose in your body to support that spike. And it just keeps rising and try to break it down. So those are some of the foods I recommend avoiding. And then I guess the meats that I like to do. Chicken's okay. Like you mentioned pork as well. Now, a lot of people in the metabolic world are, very close to their grass-fed farmer. So the guy that I get my grass-fed beef from, he'll do pork. He has pigs, but he just feeds them table food. The problem with, chickens and even cows and stuff nowadays, we feed them, chicken feed, soybeans for the cows. All that stuff is estrogenic. So when you think of seeds, grains, nuts, beans, we're feeding that to our livestock, our chickens, our pork. So you're just eating this big hunk of estrogenic steak. And that's where, things like grass-fed dairy, grass-fed milk, those kind of things are very prevalent and very important in the metabolic journey. When it comes to like a farm in Texas where, they're producing, 10,000 cows, well, they're sitting in a barn, they're sitting in their own feces. Once a month, these lactating moms, they'll give them a syringe of estrogen this big once a month to keep them lactating. This will go on for 9 years. They just sit there at one spot, they're sick. Then they're feeding them vegetable oil, soybeans, grains. Those are also estrogenic. And then they're in this really stressed barn with 10,000 moms lactating with estrogen. They're so sick, you got to pump them full of antibiotics. So generally, if you go to a store and I see this on influencers all the time, people who compete, do bodybuilding, wherever, they go to the store and just buy steak. Well, you're eating hormones and estrogen, and your overall goal is to maybe be ripped and jacked and compete in all these tournaments. Well, I would argue that how powerful the steroids are, are kind of bypassing that stress they're getting from these foods.
So your preferred sources of muscle meats are your grass-fed lambs, steaks, in terms of like beef steaks. Is that because they're less inflammatory than chicken and turkey, or is it more because they are more nutrient dense in terms of you're getting minerals such as zinc from those steaks, that kind of thing, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. So when you get one source that has a bunch of everything else in it, it's essentially less inflammatory. So if you're just getting protein and inflammatory amino acids, or you're getting, vitamins, nutrients, minerals, it's less inflammatory and it's more beneficial in a sense with the steaks and stuff.
And this leads me nicely onto a question that I wanted to ask you at some point during our conversation, which is, I haven't heard too much about it, but somewhere a couple of years ago, I read that Dr. Peat recommended, quote unquote, prescribed that people should get 50% of their protein each day from raw milk. And I thought that's really interesting. And obviously we can talk about protein numbers, what you think optimal protein numbers are. Obviously that's going to differ for somebody that's a competitive bodybuilder to just your average member of the population. I think it's important that we kind of talk about that and what you think is an optimal protein intake for the average member of society. But with that in mind, 50% of your protein intake from raw milk. Is that true? Did Dr. Peat prescribe that, so to speak? And what is the thinking behind that mechanism, if so?
Yeah, so when you look at milk protein, it's high in casein and it's high in whey. But one of Ray Peat's, arguments on this is when you're getting protein from milk, you're not getting this abundance of inflammatory amino acids. And then when you look at the profile of milk, you have vitamins A, D, K, and E. Vitamin A fuels your thyroid. Vitamin D, helps with testosterone immune system. Vitamin K helps energy production. Vitamin E helps cellular health. So when you're getting a protein source with something like that, it's awesome. And then you're not getting inflammatory amino acids. Also in milk, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting cholesterol, you're getting a bunch of calcium, again, supporting thyroid production. You're getting a little bit of pregnenolone, you're getting a little bit of DHT, you're getting a little bit of progesterone in milk. So Ray's theory is, hey, let's drink something that has a good quality protein in it and then a ton of this stuff. And that should be some of our main sources. And it makes complete sense when you want to, the minerals, like we talked about, magnesium, it's packed with magnesium, other functions, calcium, B vitamins, all this stuff aligns with the metabolic theory of, hey, we need to eat and live to support our biochemistry. So that is, Ray's theory. I actually support it. I probably drink 4 liters of milk a day. Right now, I'm kind of in a muscle building phase. So I'm consuming about 5,500 calories in training 6 days a week. And I don't recommend that for just anybody, in the metabolic world, but you got to be at this optimal state to kind of be resilient to stress and that kind of stuff. But yeah, Ray absolutely said that. He's also big in getting in the gelatinous protein sources too. So when you're eating bone broth, collagen, gelatin, you're not getting these inflammatory amino acids. And or, if I do something like chicken tacos on Friday night, we'll make sure it's a pasture-raised chicken, and I'll take a scoop of gelatin. That gelatin packed with proline and glycine kind of counteract the amino acid profile or the inflammatory amino acid profile. And then again, when your whole life is living one way, it's okay to have some chicken and turkey here. But if you're, not going to the bathroom, you can't sleep through the night, your libido's off, your cold hands and feet, I would absolutely avoid chicken, turkey, broccoli, that kind of stuff.
Okay. A lot of people are going to say they find milk inflammatory. What have you got to say about that? People that find dairy inflammatory, because there is I think it's a much smaller segment of the population worldwide than people think, right? But there obviously is there obviously are people that are lactose intolerant. But I think there's a lot of people that maybe think they are, that if they try consuming raw dairy, they're going to have a much better time with it, right? What's your stance on that side of things?
Yeah, so when it comes to dairy being inflammatory, it goes back to what I was kind of talking about the cows. If you're already in a stress state of health and you want to add in a cow's milk that is full of antibiotics, it's full of estrogen, seeds, grains, nuts, beans, that is inflammatory, even, for me, and I have really low inflammation, That's one of the basis of it. Another one of the things is when you're in this low energy state, you can't handle a lot of things. So I see people where, hey, Jake, I can't handle dairy, so we'll have them switch to some A2 or start with some raw milk. You can argue that pasteurized milk, the pasteurization can bother people. I don't really feel like it bothers me at all. I do see some people that are worried about it. But the root of it all is, when you're in a low energy state, these things that shouldn't be inflammatory, that really are, adding in like an egg, doing some kind of milk. So when it comes to the raw milk, it's definitely packed with more bacteria than any of the other milks. So I'm a big fan of raw milk. One of the issues, even in the way Ray Peat looks at it, and I agree with this, is again, when we want to consume a large amount of milk, like Ray said, hey, let's get our protein from milk. We got to drink a lot to get a good amount of protein. And you want to drink a lot of milk to get all these nutrients, cholesterol, calcium, that kind of stuff. Now with the raw milk, if you consume a gallon of raw milk a day, even a guy my size, 210, if I'm drinking 1 gallon of raw milk a day, basically what you're doing is you're consuming so much fat that you're bogging the liver down. And earlier in the podcast, we talked about, how stressed the liver is already and that inactive T4 to active T3 conversion. Too much polyunsaturated fats or the wrong fats, or even too much of the right fats when it comes to raw milk, can actually bog your liver down. So I love raw milk, and it is the highest quality milk. It's very anabolic. It's very pro-metabolic. It's less inflammatory because of all the bacteria you're getting with it. And you're not burning out a lot of those good bacteria with the pasteurization. You'll still get some in, high quality grass-fed milk, just not as much. But the problem is the consumption of the fat. It's just going to be too much. And, in deeper context, someone in my place, I could probably get away with drinking a gallon of milk a day. I'm very vascular. I'm very anabolic, very pro-metabolic. But somebody that's, in the beginning of their journey, they're trying to heal. They got a bunch of metabolic processes to fix. They end up just bogging their liver down with too much fat.
Okay, so it's obviously going to be different for different people, the amount of raw milk they can handle consuming, the amount of milk they can handle consuming each day. What is then, would you make it a range if you want, rather than a set number, of course? How much protein, how many grams of protein should the average person a day be looking to consume? And maybe break it down into two categories of the average person that's training very moderately on the basis that everyone should be doing some kind of training, some kind of exercise, and then somebody that's really looking to build mass, build muscle, lifts weights intensely a few times a week.
Yeah, so if we were to look at it from just an everyday average person, I would shoot for 1 gram per body weight. Now, again, we got to look at what kind of protein it is, though. Again, if it's
is that 1 gram per pound of body weight?
Per pound of body weight, yes. So if you're 200 pounds, 200 grams of protein is great. However, we say the average person, but if it's a bunch of turkey breasts, you're causing this inflammatory response. So we also got to take that in mind as well. But just an overall recommendation, 1 gram. Now, when you're in this metabolically sound place and you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, you could go down to 0.8 to try to avoid, that overconsumption of inflammatory amino acids, because carbohydrates are protein sparing. What I mean by that is when you have enough fructose and enough glucose, enough to support energy production, you can allow the protein to do what it wants to do. So build muscle, that kind of stuff. And when you're in this inflammatory state, a lot of that protein is utilized in different ways. So you're not utilizing it efficiently in a sense. But when you get to a metabolic state, I like, you can get away with 0.8. And then another thing Ray aligns with this as well is, if you're getting in the 200 grams of protein, we kind of don't add the collagen on top of that. So if you get a scoop of collagen at 20 grams, that's, I guess not a, full amino acid profile protein. So you can add the 200 grams and then a scoop of collagen. But I like most of it from something like milk, high quality milk. I drink 3-4 liters. And then, grass-fed steak, organ meats, that kind of stuff. And then you can even look a little further. Potatoes are pretty packed with protein as well. So it's one of the vegans, people's kind of main sources of, vegetable source, I guess, of protein. So, and then I guess if you're in a really good place, I guess my views and stuff align with that really good place. Because I'm not a fan of, hey, I'm working out 7 days a week. I want to go up to maybe 1.5 grams per pound of body weight of protein. Because if your metabolic functions aren't aligned, that another 0.5 gram, let's say it's 30 more grams of protein, it's probably just going to be inflammatory. So I like the 0.8, a gram. I could go up to, there's days where I do 1.5 grams, but I'm not super particular on, hey, I need to hit my 230 grams of protein, because I'm eating a ton of carbs. I'm in a really good place. But if it was my goal to put on some more muscle again, I would probably turn to the metabolic world, calm everything down, increase the processes, increase thyroid production, increase testosterone production. So I guess to answer your question, if you're hitting it hard, you want to go up to 1.5 grams, I'm okay with that. But again, I'm always trying to recommend people to dial in the metabolic health first before, my goal is to put on 20 pounds of muscle. Well, if you're estrogen dominant, cold hands and feet, not sleeping through the night, not eating enough carbs, it's kind of redundant or counterintuitive to say, hey, I want to put on a bunch of muscle.
I think that's a really good point. You've kind of got two pathways to wanting to be more anabolic and build more muscle. You can consume more and more protein in the hope that your body's going to use that, or you can focus on your metabolic health and getting your body to use the protein you're giving it better, more optimally, and actually getting the most from it. I think that's an important thing to think about, because we focus on protein so much. That's obviously what we're told to focus on, and it is important. We need a requisite amount of protein. We need enough protein, especially if we're training hard and want to build muscle. But we also need to be looking at, is our body using that protein in the best way possible, as efficiently and optimally as possible as well. So I think we've covered that really thoroughly in terms of the protein sources you recommend. You've got your organ meats, you've got your, if you're looking at your muscle meats, you've got your grass-fed steaks, whether that's lamb, beef, ox, bison, any animal like that. You've got your milk. 3 to 4 litres is astronomical. I thought I was doing a lot at 2 litres a day. I've had to put that to the wayside at the moment because I'm cutting weight for my comps. So the 2 litres of milk, unfortunately, is not part of my daily diet at the moment. But yeah, I thought I was consuming a lot at 2 litres. 3 to 4 is pretty astronomical. So we've got the raw milk. You said the gelatinous protein sources as well, your collagen. Explain to me why the emphasis on gelatinous protein sources. What is it about those that you really like when it comes to the thermo diet?
Yeah, so the gelatinous protein sources, you probably heard, people used to eat nose to tail, and that's where you're eating the collagen, the tendons, that kind of stuff. And it just so happens that those are packed in the body's, number one anti-stress amino acid, glycine, and then proline. And going back to the metabolic theory, we're not getting all these inflammatory amino acids. That's the basis of it. It's very healing. Gelatin, bone broth, collagen, those all bring down inflammation in the whole body, systemic inflammation. They heal the gut. They heal when you're dealing with something like leaky gut, your gut junctions, your gut go like this because they're inflamed, and then stuff starts flowing from your gut in your bloodstream that doesn't belong. So they're really, anti-stress. They're really anti-inflammation. They're really, pro-metabolic, pro-thyroid, that kind of stuff. So the more we can get, these anti-inflammatory amino acids in the diet, the more you're going to support the overall theory of energy production.
Okay, so I feel like we've covered protein. Let's go, well, we've got carbs and fat. Let's go into fats first. I think there's 2 important things to focus on. PUFAs, what are PUFAs, and why are they not so great for you? And cholesterol. We're told cholesterol is bad for us. It's going to give us heart disease. Talk to me about the thermo diet, Dr. A. Peat's stance on cholesterol, and from both of those, from a mechanistic perspective, how does that practically impact what fats you recommend people should be eating and where they should be getting those fats from in their diet?
Yeah, so definitely a rabbit hole, but we're going to dive into it. So polyunsaturated fats are a double carbon chain, chain of bonds. So what happens is they look like this. You have a bunch of bonds, and then their chains, there's 2 of them there. That's the double carbon. The more carbon bonds you have in between these chains, it's more brittle. It's going to break. It's fragile. So when you talk about polyunsaturated fats, seeds are seed oils, canola oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, fish oil. They're all in the same category. Now, when they hit our body temperature at room temperature, they oxidize. So they're unstable. So as soon as they feel the heat, they oxidize. So when they're oxidizing, they're causing free radical stress, oxidative rust. They're really causing systemic inflammation through your whole body. And, a thing that's not talked about enough is you're spiking your estrogen as well with these polyunsaturated fats. And when you think about the body signaling, hey, we have a bunch of inflammation. Well, estrogen is the hormone for growth. You're going to spike your estrogen whether you have inflammation in the knee. If you get in a car accident and cut your gut open, you're going to spike your estrogen to heal that wound. So when you're taking something like seed oils, you're spiking your estrogen like crazy. And when you talk about like the protective hormones to stress hormones, they should be on a teeter-totter at the park like this. One kid jumps, one kid goes down. So when your protective hormones are high, you're in this high energy flow. When you get in a car accident, your stress hormones go like this. So same thing in a sense, when you eat a bunch of fish oils, a bunch of seed oils, vegetable oil, deep fried fish, that kind of stuff, you're doing that to your hormone balance. You're spiking it. And then another bad thing that these polyunsaturated fats do too is they store in your cell. So inside every cell in your body you have a cycle called the Randall cycle. Now, because the body's always, trying to do things to protect you and restore homeostasis, that Randall cycle is switching back and forth constantly. And in 2 trillion cells, this big abundance of polyunsaturated fats, bad fats, fats that oxidize, cause free radical damage, spike your estrogen. And then over here is glucose. So one of the main problems in the world right now is polyunsaturated fats. Now, when you think about, hey, I'm craving sugar, or your blood sugar's dropping, you're kind of antsy, you just want a cookie. So you go grab the bag of Oreos and dunk it in some milk and eat that bag of Oreos. You're trying to give your body the glucose it needs, and it's telling you that. However, those Oreos have canola oil in it, another seed oil. So you're adding to this abundance of polyunsaturated fats. So because of that Randall cycle, what it's doing is it's forcing the body to burn down the saturated fats, because that's the only way we can get to use our glucose. The main energy of the cell, of our bodies, is glucose. So it's like a secondary response. Hey, we got to go through the stress quick to burn this. Well, what we do is we eat another cookie and another cookie and another cookie, eat the whole bag. Well, then you just say 2,000 calories, and it was shitty for you, and you just added to this abundance of polyunsaturated fats. Now, when you can get to the metabolic world and stop doing fish oils, stop eating polyunsaturated fats, stop cooking with them, they're already rancid. Fish oils get sent to you in a semi truck, they're oxidizing in the room temperature or the outside temperature of the truck, and then you're eating a bunch of them. So they're really messing with your hormones. They're blocking testosterone production. They're spiking all your stress hormones. And one of the main, focal points of health, in my opinion, is learning to balance your blood sugar. They are completely tanking your blood sugar balance because you're eating them all the time. You eat a bag of chips, anything in a bag in the United States has polyunsaturated fats in it. So think of that Randall cycle, constantly trying to get to just use your sugar. That's why diabetes is one of the number one causes or health issues in the world, and it stems directly from the introduction of polyunsaturated fats to America. In America, when we did that, it basically ruined our health. And then after that came, arterial plaque. So people were starting to get heart attacks. Well, when you think about the polyunsaturated fats and it's floating in your blood, and this is your artery, your jugular, and it's floating, it hasn't oxidized yet, and your heart goes boom, boom. Well, it oxidizes. So then you have a lesion right here, right? Because cholesterol comes along, and that's the fire department or the police. When you have an issue, it de-escalates the issue or helps heal. So it puts a Band-Aid on that lesion. And then you eat more polyunsaturated fats, and then you have another lesion. And then your artery starts to go like this. In the 40s, when the world wars started, World War I, we went to all these countries, and we introduced that to other countries. So that's why you see in Germany, Japanese street food is made in vegetable oil. Before the world wars and before World War I and II, the whole world had no idea about polyunsaturated fats. In places like Germany, they cook with coconut oil. You can go there today and still get pastries and stuff in Germany. They have high quality stuff, but all the street food in Japan was just steamed. The Japanese are one of the healthiest people in the world, but I would argue not the last 3-4 generations, because street food's everywhere. Polyunsaturated fats are everywhere. So yeah, polyunsaturated fats, they're tanking your testosterone. They're one of the root causes of cancer. I would also argue that they're carcinogenic. When you think about, eating polyunsaturated fats spiking your estrogen, well, when your estrogen's high throughout the body, inflammation's high. And again, the protective hormone profile, your protective hormones are tanked. You're blocking your thyroid. And again, estrogen is the hormone for growth. So, one of the main pathways for cancer development is lactic acid, nitric oxide, estrogen.
To zone back in on cholesterol, obviously we can consume dietary cholesterol, which comes from saturated fat, right? Cholesterol, my understanding is it gets a bad rap because it's basically a band-aid mechanism to inflammation in our blood vessels, and cholesterol is acting as the band-aid to cover up those lesions in the blood vessels caused by excess sugar, sources of inflammation. Basically, it's repairing that, or doing its best to repair that, and because of that, that's what's causing the plaque in the arteries, which is leading to heart disease. So whilst cholesterol may be the cause of heart disease, it's not the root cause. It's trying to repair other issues, right? If we go a bit more into cholesterol, its relationship to saturated fat, and then the benefits of saturated fat, it does saturated fat again inherently cause heart disease, and what are your preferred sources of fat? what are the preferred sources of fat in the thermo diet?
Yeah, so when it comes to cholesterol, it's the number one healing thing in your body. We need it. We need it to make hormones that protect us, protective hormones. But 88% of your brain is all cholesterol. 80+% of your testes, your ovaries, everything is packed with cholesterol. And that's where it kind of got the bad rap, where when they introduced the seed oils, they were going in all these arteries of people who had heart attacks, and they seen a bunch of polyunsaturated fat plaque bound around cholesterol. Now, cholesterol was just doing its job. It's protecting you. So it gets a huge bad rap, and it's the most protective thing it is. It's essentially, like the fire department or the police. I would say that cholesterol is one of the most important things to have a good amount of in your diet, and not to inhibit, its processes or production in the body at all. So when we go into, does saturated fat cause heart disease, coconut oil, grass fed? Absolutely not. The only thing that's causing that arterial buildup, when you eat a saturated fat, coconut oil, beef tallow, butter, ghee, you don't get this buildup in your artery at all because nothing's oxidizing. Instead of having these double bond, double carbon chains, there is no carbon chain. It's extremely strong and doesn't oxidize. You can even take like a fully hydrogenated coconut oil, and grab some pasture-raised chicken wings and deep fry them at 500 degrees. There's no oxidation at all because they're so strong and such a, I guess, beautiful chemical makeup when you look at the difference of a saturated fat and a carbon bond or unsaturated fat. It's a world of difference. It's like this beautiful thing made right. The structure is beautiful. It doesn't oxidize, doesn't break down, doesn't cause free radical damage. And then the PUFAs do all of that. So yeah, I would go into, or going back to it, butter, coconut oil, tallow. Those are probably my top three. You can do a lard, but just keep in mind if you're doing like pig lard or pig fat, if it was fed polyunsaturated fats, then it's really not that super stable saturated fat. Now, if you took like a wild boar that's eating shrubs, fruits, other, little mammals that finds bugs, now their lard is going to be perfect. It's going to be saturated. So the polyunsaturated fats really put a damper on evolution, our health, everything.
Yeah, so when we're looking at fats that are kind of compliant under the thermo diet, we're looking at the saturated fats because they're stable. Like that's what saturated means, right? In essence. So they're not going to oxidize. They're not going to cause this oxidative stress in the body. And obviously that kind of hinges on the fact or on the premise that the rest of your diet is in check, or the rest of your health, metabolically speaking, is in check. You're not in a stress state. So the cholesterol that's going to be produced by virtue of you consuming those saturated fats isn't going to have to act as this fire department being in the body to repair all this inflammation, all this stress that's going on, that's going to cause the artery, the plaque in the arteries and that build-up. We've already kind of covered carbs quite a bit in terms of the practical application for that, what carbs under the thermo diet is going to look like. Anything that's easily digestible, as you said. You've got your fruits, and then you've got potato, rice, if people can handle it. But then to kind of step back and go to the original point, as we've just done for fat, carbs. A lot of people will hear that carbs are bad for you. They're sugar, right? And you don't want all this sugar. Sugar's the enemy. Sugar is going to give you heart disease again, spike your insulin, all of this. If you could just kind of round off the point on carbs for us, please. Carbs, good or bad? What's the context in which they can be good or bad?
Yeah, so when it comes to carbohydrates, absolutely good. Good sources, though, when I say that. Glucose or carbohydrates are the main fuel source of the body. So if you're lacking in your main fuel source, you're stressing your system out. You're inhibiting thyroid function, hormone production, sleep, digestion, libido. So we need an abundance of an energy source, and we need it to be the main source for our body. So obviously, there's a big discrepancy when it comes to like high fructose corn syrup. I would not, put that in a metabolic carb source, but fruits, milks, root vegetables, those kind of things are going to be packed with a really good form of fructose or glucose. Nothing like High fructose corn syrup, that's non-GMO. It's made with a bunch of hexane. I wouldn't even put that in my category. So we gotta keep in mind, we want to fuel the body with a high quality source of fructose or glucose, metabolically speaking. So yes, once we talk about, when we're talking about this metabolic theory of health and supporting the body's biochemistry, glucose is absolutely required in all those processes. We need it. It's not bad. It's not bad for you at all. When it comes to, my coaching clients and stuff, when they get to the metabolic health world and they're kind of worried about, hey, I'm eating too much, can this make me gain weight? And I'm kind of going on a side tangent, but when we talk about, fructose and balancing your blood sugar, insulin, that kind of stuff, when we're eating a protein, carb, and fat, you're getting an insulin spike, then that's grabbing the glucose and helping with the glucose uptake in the cell. And then when you have that fat source with it, it's not shooting. So you want this, one of the, I guess, things not talked about enough in the metabolic world or in the health world or in the bodybuilding world, fitness world, we need to eat to balance our blood sugar, so your blood sugar is to be like this. Because again, when we're doing that, we're supporting that overall metabolic function, the way your biochemistry works. Now, once you get into my coaching program, I guess this is an example of, the carbs and stuff. We'll kind of talk about how it works. So when you get in there and you're eating every 3 to 4 hours a protein, carb, and fat. Now you're getting the insulin spike, glucose, fat. You're balancing your blood sugar. Now, when you balance that blood sugar, testosterone increases, thyroid production increases, mindset, cognition, everything increases when you have this balance of this overall like metabolic repeat world. And one of the main things is the protein, carb, and fat, high quality sources. Now, not too much glucose. You can't just eat 15,000 grams of bananas a day because that's not going to be good. But we want, I like to shoot for 50% carbs, 25 protein, 25 fat. And that's depending on where you're at. So it's like a ballpark. Now, you're getting enough glucose with the 50% carbohydrates to support energy production, to store liver glycogen, to support blood sugar balance. And you got to remember that when glucose runs low, you hear, like you said, carbohydrates are demonized. Well, it's funny when they say that, because when glucose is low, what rises? Your glucocorticosteroids. So all these stress hormones require glucose, and they spike when glucose is low. So it's hard to get this argument like, hey, carbs are bad for you, carbs help make you put on weight. But when you don't have the carbs, like you go keto, all your stress hormones rise and they stay elevated, So in my coaching program, what we'll do is, balance your blood sugar and find out, maybe 15 times body weight. We got to find your ballpark maintenance calorie intake. Along with that, we need to balance your blood sugar. And then from there, once you get to this place where, hey, I'm eating this abundance of energy, instead of telling your body, hey, I'm in this state of famine or state of scarcity, when you can get out of that stress state or kind of shift the redox balance from, hey, I'm in this state of scarcity, I'm eating all the wrong foods. I balanced my blood sugar. I'm eating the right amount of all this metabolic stuff. Then you can shift this redox balance to the state of abundance. So then at that point, everybody wants to cut down, like you're feeling better, happy, hungry, horny. I'm sleeping through the night. This is awesome. This metabolic stuff's working. Well, at that point, you need to actually consume more carbohydrates and more nutrients because your thyroid increased, and then now your fuel need is more. So once you get to that point where you're kind of going through that metabolic adaptation in my program, if you can do that, you get to the state of abundance where the fat goes, because you're telling the body, hey, we're getting this abundance of everything we need. We're getting it constantly all the time. As opposed to, keto, vegan, carnivore, hunter-gatherer, you're in this state of scarcity. So what your body's doing is your cortisol is spiked. All your stress hormones are spiked. And when you eat food, you're storing the fat around your love handles, your side chest, wherever you store it. Now, when you get your body out of that state, that's where people go, and all of a sudden you're getting veins in your deltoids and everything's popping. And that's kind of going back to what we mentioned earlier is, if your overall goal is fitness and to look good and to look aesthetic, if you're doing any of these things we're talking about, not concentrate on some of them, you're not going to be anywhere close to where you could be. Maybe you have a nice physique, you like to train and you're in a good routine, but just imagine the results you would get if you're supporting this metabolic processes. And the most important one, again, glucose. We need it. It's not bad. I consume 500 grams of carbohydrates a day, and I'm very vascular. I have veins coming out, my lats and traps, my abs pop, and I'm at a point where I can eat kind of what I want during the day, as long as it's metabolic, and I can even handle, know, if I go on vacation and eat a burger and some fries, but I'm in a good place, so what? Sometimes can't be too nitty gritty, but I'm at this high energy place. I'm consuming tons of milk, tons of food, tons of energy. And I'm in that state of abundance where I've never put on muscle like this in my whole life, the last 3-4 years. And going back to the beginning when I was 150 pounds, we didn't talk about my weight at that point when I had the 11 lumps. But I was 150 pounds skinny fat, 3 whorls, sunken in face. Now I'm 210, you know, and that's a lot of muscle mass to put on. But I put on muscle with these. I just train a half hour a day. So going back to glucose, it's the preferred energy source of the cell. We need it. When you think of the term carbohydrate, carbs hydrate your muscle. We need carbohydrates. We don't want to be working out in a fasted state, in a catabolic state, because you're spiking lactic acid, estrogen, nitric oxide, and that again is hindering your fitness goals or whatever your goals are going to be.
So again, it goes back to the fact that carbs, I kind of have a follow-up question, but to round that off, the issue that a lot of people have with ingesting carbs, with their carbohydrate intake, is that because their stress hormones are so high, their body is not dealing or not using those carbohydrates optimally. It goes back to the fact that because they're not metabolically healthy, the body doesn't know how to efficiently use those carbs for energy, for quote unquote good, basically. So it's storing it as adipose tissue. So you're getting these massive insulin spikes. That's my question. Why don't you like these big spikes in insulin? You're talking about balancing the blood sugar. Why don't you like that spike in insulin at all?
Yeah, because when you get such a huge insulin spike, you essentially burn out your glucose and then you have none. So again, we talked about like when you're intermittent fasting and you run out of glucose, your stress hormones rise. So if you don't eat for 10 hours and then you get this huge insulin spike, it'll require the glucose to release, and then it's spiking so high, then your glucose is gone. So then you don't have a balance. And when you get into an imbalance, then your stress hormones spike. So it's pretty basic and simple, but a lot of people don't think of, hey, I don't want to eat sugar because I gain weight. But when you don't eat sugar, you spike your cortisol and you gain weight. So it's just a lot of the mainstream kind of stuff that's affected, and there's so much stuff that goes against your grain, it's completely wrong. And then when you mention people can't handle a big amount of carbohydrates, I would argue that it's the food in general. So in the beginning when we talked about we're not converting food to energy, that's the biggest problem. So when we think about like metabolism, metabolic health and stuff, we actually have a wasteful metabolism. You should be eating food, it should be breaking down the digestive tract, and then it should go and waste and burn the energy. So what happens with people in that stress state, you're in that state of scarcity. So your energy production's like this because there's none to really give away. And then your stress hormones are high. So you're like, hey, we don't know when we're going to eat, or maybe we're eating 1,000 calories a day and you need 3. We're storing a little bit of fat, a little bit of fat, a little bit of fat. So when you get to the metabolic world and you're like, hey, I can't handle too much carbohydrates. Like let's say I'm coaching somebody from keto. Well, at that point, we'll maybe do 33, 33, 33. And slowly adjust their carbohydrates and adjust everything else. But in the meantime, what we're doing is we're getting rid of micronutrient deficiencies. We're balancing our blood sugar the best we can. Sleep's the problem. We're optimizing sleep. We're spending more time in the sun. So as your metabolic health journey goes on, it kind of goes like this. And then you'll go from, I've coached 1,000 people that, went from carnivore, keto to metabolic eating. And it's hard to adapt to that because essentially what you did, if you were keto for 10 years, you pushed out all the glucose out of your muscles. So now a guy my size, 210, I'm storing like 14 to 16 pounds of muscle glycogen. And when you store that amount of muscle glycogen, again, you're supporting thyroid, metabolic health, all these processes. Now, when people go keto and they avoid carbohydrates, you're running on stress hormones, you're like high on adrenaline, and you have no glucose. So, that has to do with thyroid, cholesterol, protective hormone production. You're not doing none of this stuff because you're so stressed out. And then you come back to, hey, my health tanked. I thought keto was working. You come back and you want to try this metabolic stuff. Well, people ask me all the time, Jake, why did I put on some weight switching to metabolic diet? Well, you just pushed 14 pounds of muscle glycogen out for 10 years. So when you eat glycogen, you should restore it. So that's another point of, post-workout, when I'm eating within a half hour post-workout, because even in a place like me, if I go work out for an hour, and you're in a good place, not in a bad place, you're burning your muscle glycogen. That's a natural process. and you want to, tightrope, tiptoe walk on, hey, I burned my muscle glycogen out. Now I need to stop, eat, and replenish the muscle glycogen. Now, when you're intermittent fasting and you go work out 10 hours fasted, you do 3 reps and you get this amazing pump. Because I was keto, vegan, carnivore, I fasted. You think it's this amazing pump, but actually it's lactic acid, and that's a stress byproduct. So that's another thing. You see all these people do intermittent fasting, keto, and they're working out all the time, trying to get big, but you don't even have your main fuel source. You don't even have muscle glycogen at all. So essentially you're just in this super catabolic state, and you're just breaking down your tissue, and you look lean and shredded, but that's more of like a stress famine state, and then you have no idea.
What about caffeine and nicotine? So we've kind of covered our diet, protein, fats, carbs, and got into all of that. The other things we consume on a daily basis, obviously there's water, and we could go into all of that, but I think something that's really more interesting, to be honest, is caffeine and nicotine. Do they have a home in the thermo diet, or do you look to avoid caffeine and nicotine? What's your stance on those?
Yeah, so when it comes to caffeine is very pro-metabolic. Now, you gotta approach it with context, though. One of the problems is when you're in this low energy state, we keep kind of talking about this because it's just kind of the world. All of us are in this low energy state, and you got to get to this high energy state. Now, when you're in this stress state and your thyroid's really functioning, and you're not balancing your blood sugar, you don't even have glucose in the cell, and you do something like coffee and maple syrup. Well, that caffeine will skyrocket your thyroid production. And like I said earlier, when your thyroid production increases, you need to have enough fuel to match that increase. And then when you can match it, you're in this beautiful place of health. Now, when people come to me and they're in a stress state where they're just eating McDonald's, this Western diet, they're stressed out. So I'll say, hey, let's make some real coffee, ground your own beans, use some filtered water, add a milk and honey. Even in that place, they get anxious, they get anxiety, that kind of stuff. So 2 of the reasons this happens is your thyroid actually kicked into gear, because that's what caffeine does, and it's very pro-metabolic, pro-thyroid. But you don't have any sugar in your cells because the PUFAs, it's seeds, grains, nuts, beans. You're doing it this whole other lifestyle where it's inhibiting your blood sugar balance and are having glucose in your blood. So that you get a stress response from coffee, and people say, well, Jake, I can't handle this. I'm sweating, I'm freaking out, I'm having an anxiety attack. Well, you just actually felt your thyroid kick into gear, and you felt the need for fuel, and you didn't provide it. And that's what's happening, but people just don't know how to identify it. And then the other reason that you can't handle caffeine, is when you're doing keto again, or some kind of extreme diet, or you're just eating too much polyunsaturated fats, you actually have non-alcoholic fatty liver. Now, when you're in this non-alcoholic fatty state, you're not having that T4 to T3 conversion like we keep talking about. And that just gives you the same response as, hey, I'm freaking out, that kind of stuff, because your liver is like, hey, we're kicking everything into gear and I can't kick into gear. So you have this stress response again. Now, when it comes to, like my state of health, before I go to bed, I'll do like a Mexi Coke with a little bit of caffeine, or pure cane sugar Pepsi we have in the United States now has a little bit of caffeine. I'll mix that with a teaspoon of sugar, which is a lot for people in a stress state, but for me, it's not at all. So a teaspoon of cane sugar, and I'll throw in 4 aspirin. Now, caffeine is actually a sedative when you're in a good place, a little bit of caffeine. So for example, when I do this mixture, I'll do, if you add caffeine, a little bit of aspirin, a little bit of sugar, I get hot, cool, calm, collected. I fall asleep for 10 hours because you're feeling your thyroid. You're feeling it with the caffeine. You're providing glucose, and something like aspirin is, almost like a thyroid medication. So when I have anybody else do this, they love it as well too. So caffeine is very, very pro-metabolic. It's got a bunch of good benefits, but the main problem is, hey, I'm not in this place, a good enough place of health to handle the benefits of caffeine. And that goes back to like when we talked about milk. Some people in low thyroid place can't handle milk, and then some people can't break down eggs. And when you get to this place, you can revisit these things, and then you can really reap the benefits of that. So coffee is one of the most, beneficial things for us to consume, and caffeine is very, very pro-metabolic. But again, you just got to be in this place where you can handle it.
I've never heard that before, about a small amount of caffeine being a sedative. I'm personally very sensitive to caffeine. Any caffeine just will make me stay up all night long if I have it too close to bed. But that's really interesting to hear. And you mix it with sugar, with cane sugar and aspirin. I suppose I've got two questions. I did want to talk to you about aspirin in any event, so we can go into that. Before we do that, just go into the cane sugar. Why do you mix it with cane sugar? Is that because that when you have sugar with caffeine, it helps kind of blunt that increase in cortisol? Am I correct in saying that?
No, it's not in that sense. It's the sense of when you do something to increase thyroid production, you need to give it fuel. So it needs more gas. So if you're kicking the caffeine stimulating the thyroid, the aspirin stimulating the thyroid, well, that ramps up if you give it fuel. It's, I keep saying like stimulate, kick it into gear. But when it's just running right, you're like, cool, calm, collected. You're like smiling. That's what it feels like to take aspirin, caffeine, and some sugar. So it could be fructose, a banana, you can do a glass of milk, that kind of stuff, like some kind of bedtime snack. But that's kind of my favorite. You're getting a little bit of caffeine, and you don't need 2 cups of coffee before bed. But if I drink a whole can of or a bottle of Mexi Coke, which is a metabolic Pepsi, cola, or a can of Pepsi, I'm not up at all. I'm falling asleep in 10 minutes. My ears get hot, my nose gets hot. I'm just smiling. So that's that like high energy, high thyroid state, is that cool, calm, collective. When you're in that zone where you're like, hey, I'm happy, hungry, horny. I'm happy and I'm hungry, I'm horny all the time. I'm smiling, I'm resilient to stress. That's how I feel after. I feel like that in general, but before bed, your whole body gets hot. And that's actually thyroid running right and kicking into gear and having fuel.
And the Mexico that you spoke of is the Mexican Coca-Cola that's just cola, water, and cane sugar, right? So that's just in your mind, under the thermo diet, that's compliant in the sense that it's just easily digestible, quote unquote, clean, a non-toxic source of carbohydrates, of glucose.
Yeah, the Mexico and Mexicans. I think Georgie was talking about a study last week where Mexicans consume 88% more cola than people in the United States, and they have 60% less type 2 diabetes issues. But the thing is, again, in America, we drink high fructose corn syrup. Now, high fructose corn syrup should not even be called sugar. You're taking this non-GMO corn made in a lab. That's weird in the first place. And then you're cutting it with hexane, bleach, all these other things, and you're calling it a sugar. So this is where, your body takes a source like that. And we earlier were talking about carbohydrates. That's something you can't even really break down. It's just a stressor. It's inflammatory. So when you're doing that and eating a bunch of seed oils, you're going to get type 2 diabetes right away. But yeah, I was shocked when I heard that they consume 88 times more cola than an average American does. But it's Sprite and cola in a glass bottle, and it's just a couple ingredients that's very pro-metabolic.
Aspirin. Let's go into aspirin. This was something that Dr. Ray Peat is well known for. His prescription, the emphasis he puts on how good aspirin can be for many people. Why is this? What's the deal with aspirin?
Yeah, so going back to some of like the history of the aspirin, and again, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about today, a lot of things started to take a turn or change or were around in the beginning of the century. Now, in the early 1900s, they came out with aspirin, the wonder drug. Now, the whole world, 1920s, 1930s, everyone was taking aspirin, and nobody's having any health issues. And it was very abundant. It was everywhere. Every little small Eastern European country, everyone was taking aspirin. And then what happened was when the seed oils came in, the cholesterol medications came in, the estrogen, birth control came in. These people were noticing when people were taking aspirin, they were getting rid of their issues. So this is where the big bash that you see every day, all the time. Aspirin causes brain bleeds. Aspirin's bad for your gut, blah, blah, blah. But, when you think of something that's super good for you and you can't make money off it because there's millions of tablets everywhere for cheap, the powers that be can't take that and put it into medication. And that also at the same time, they don't want nothing that's getting rid of diabetes, nothing that's helping thyroid disease. They don't want something that's helping cancer because they want you sick and they're making money off it. Now, when it comes to aspirin, it's completely boosting your thyroid. It's lowering your estrogen. It's increasing the energy flow. It's grabbing polyunsaturated fats, glucuronidase out the blood. It's actually increasing testosterone and DHT production. It's bringing down systemic inflammation. It's stopping lipid peroxidation. You could talk about the benefit, or I could talk about the benefits of aspirin for days because it's doing so many things. And it's just basically a bunch of salicylic acid with a little bit of cornstarch. I prefer Jerry Kerr old school 1930s aspirin. Hasn't changed since. And then the more powerful these, I guess, the elitists you want to call them, are this big power that wants everybody sick gets, the more millions and millions and millions they're putting into bashing aspirin. I even was listening to Georgie and I was reading the studies where last year, one of the main owners of the whole world's like 401k, this one big company owns all of it, right? Well, he was diving in aspirin about a year ago and he had this big forum, then had everybody come in. He's like, how is this aspirin making people live 18 months longer than they should? Because if you die at a certain point, and these superpowers own, you get rich if a person lives till we're 67. But if they live till 72, we didn't make the money you want to make off. This sucks. So then they put $1 billion last year into bashing aspirin. So that's in short what it's doing. It's helping with calcium shuttling. It's helping with everything that we talk about, blood sugar balance, everything we talked about on the podcast, some way, shape, or form today. Aspirin's helping with it. And one of the main things aspirin's doing to really help. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, what is the mechanism via which it's carrying out all of these benefits? Is it because it's basically helping circulation because it's a vasodilator, right? It thins your blood. Is that the mechanism for all of these downstream cascading effects?
Yeah, so some are different reasons. Some are, I wouldn't say it's the vasodilation. It's what it's doing with all the body processes. So one of the main things that is contributing to helping a lot of these negatives is when you consume a polyunsaturated fat, there's two pathways that goes in the system. So aspirin is a COX-2 inhibitor. So there's two pathways, COX-2 and LOX-2. So when you see a PUFA coming, the COX-2 enzyme goes like this, it gets all excited, right? And then when they bind, behind that's the prostaglandin cascade. So any kind of stress thing you can think of, free radical damage, oxidative stress, oxidative rust, spike in your estrogen, inflammation, all this stuff. When they meet, that's where all the bad stuff happens. So when you take an aspirin daily, it's a COX-2 inhibitor. So it goes like this and it comes back. And aspirin will allow it to block this, come back and glucuronidase through LOX2 out your liver. So when you're not having that, prostaglandin cascade, you're stopping estrogen spikes, blood sugar dysregulation, cancer, all this stuff. So that's one of the main mechanisms of aspirin and why it's, so beneficial. So if you are, you eat a bad food and that happens, there's a world of things that are happening. And if you're avoiding them things, it's great. But if you're still eating something like a polyunsaturated fats and you're blocking the COX-2 every single day, all day, that's kind of the main mechanism of how it's doing that.
Is there a recommendation under the thermo diet for the dosage of aspirin one should be taken daily, and should they be taking it in the morning before bed? What are the protocols?
Yeah, so when it comes to dosages, one tablet is 325 milligrams, and then one tablet to 3 grams is considered a low dose. When you're new to aspirin supplementation, you want to be dialed in, you want to be well versed in eating the right foods, this kind of stuff. But if you're just an average day person, I would start out with one tablet, crush it up on the countertop with like a supplement or a coffee cup, and then put it in some filtered water. Let the cornstarch kind of settle and drink it. You can do it warm. Some people like it warm. That's a good starting point. Now, there's all kinds of, it's multifaceted. So, if you're trying to boost testosterone, or if you're trying to get rid of cancer, or if you're trying to balance blood sugar, or if you're trying to boost thyroid, there's all kinds of ways, sequences to use aspirin to do that. If you're really trying to balance your blood sugar, and stop the PUFAs from oxidizing, that kind of stuff, or lower your estrogen. Again, when you lower your estrogen, your blood sugar is better, that kind of stuff. So if it's thyroid boosting, you're really low thyroid, at one tablet, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're getting kind of surge in thyroid, and you're lowering estrogen, that kind of stuff. That's a good idea. But my general recommendation is start off one before bed. Now, if you're monitoring waking body temp and resting heart rate, adding in, let's go back to that. Waking body temp and resting heart rate are basically telling you what your thyroid's doing. Now, if you're don't change anything in your life and you take a tablet of aspirin before bed, you're going to sleep better. All these other things are going to happen. Less lipid peroxidation, less estrogen production, all this kind of stuff. When those happen, your waking body temp and rest time are going to be a little better the next day, in a sense. So adding in an aspirin tablet, you're supporting thyroid, and then you're sleeping through the night. Then I would see where you jump in the next week or two. Hey, I feel better. I like this. I slept better. My libido's better. And then you can add in 2 before bed. And it all has to do with like your life, where you're at in your metabolic journey. I don't recommend slamming 2 grams of aspirin like I would before bed. I actually had a client do this the other day. He's in Australia and he's new to the metabolic world, and he's coming from keto, and he's like 6'4", 230, 240, big guy. And he's not used to carbs yet. And we talked about that a little bit. You can't just shuttle in a bunch of carbs coming from low carb. And I was telling him that I was taking 2 grams of aspirin before bed, and I'm using that in like a extreme muscle building phase. But he took the 2 grams and he's like, what should I start off with? I said, Carl, start with 1 tablet before bed. So he gets up the next morning and he takes like 9 tablets before work. And he's like, my blood sugar is dropping. Again, that goes back to when you kick your thyroid into gear, you're already eating really low carb. You're 6'5", 240. You should be eating 4,000 calories. You're not eating enough energy. So he kicked the thyroid into gear, and he's like, whew. That's how powerful it is. But he shouldn't have done that. He knows it. He's like, because you did it. I don't recommend doing things that other coaches do, or you got to be well versed in that kind of stuff. So start off with 1, see how you react. Physically, mentally, emotionally. You're gonna feel something. De-stress, cool, calm, collective, and then slowly build it up. And then another thing is to be mindful of the aspirin. It is a little blood thinning. And we do recommend taking a little bit of K2. But in my case, and again, don't do what Coach Jake's doing right now. I drink the 3-4 liters of milk. That's absolutely packed with K2. I eat 3 to 6 ounces of liver a week. That's packed with K2. So I don't take a K2, but if you're new to the metabolic world and you're going to play with aspirin, K2 is a coagulant. So to give you a little context, maybe 5-6 years ago, I was again playing around with high doses of aspirin, maybe 1,500 milligrams a day. And I cut my hand really bad at work. And you think you bleed out all over because you have thin blood because you're taking a lot of aspirin. I was bleeding for 2 minutes and it stopped. But again, I was drinking a lot of milk. And there's more K2 in 4 liters of milk than there is in probably 10 supplement capsules you're taking. So if you're going to experiment with aspirin, it's one of the Swiss Army knives of the metabolic world, and I think your life in general. I highly recommend it for all my clients. My daughter, my son will take it when he's sick, the grandparents, all the way up. Everybody takes aspirin. It's basically the wonder drug. So start off with 1 capsule, see how you feel, monitor waking body temp, and you can move slowly up from there.
I think an important question to ask is, how is it different from the other pharmaceuticals that it's in the category of? How do I describe it? We think of aspirin as the same as paracetamol, ibuprofen. I don't know if they're branded differently and called differently in America, but in our minds in the UK, aspirin's the same as paracetamol, ibuprofen, any other kind of pill you would take to, if you've got a headache, to painkillers. Sorry, that's the word I'm looking for. Painkillers. It's a painkiller like any other. How exactly is it different from other painkillers?
Yeah, so the NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. So when it comes to like Tylenol, ibuprofen, they wreck the liver, they tax the liver, and the difference between just some salicylic acid and not some kind of over-the-counter made in a lab thing to bring down inflammation. When you take something like a Tylenol PM or Tylenol 500, you're really stressing and taxing the hell out of the liver. And when you take aspirin, pure salicylic acid, you're just improving liver function, thyroid function, you're supporting the system. Pure salicylic acid is not taxing the liver. And when you think about the NSAIDs, like in the metabolic world, we recommend staying away from them. A couple of simple things that we don't think about in our everyday lives is, like when a child has a fever, your body gets hot to fight a virus, right? So what do we do in America? We take a Tylenol, we tax the liver, and you brought down that heat to kill the virus. So it's counterintuitive. So it sucks when your kid's sick and he's got a toothache or something. And you're like, let me take this, let me take that. So we really need to, in my point of view, we should let the body be hot, and you'll be sicker less time. If my kids don't feel good, I don't mind giving them some aspirin and milk, aspirin orange juice or something at all.
Okay, so the mechanisms that they work via is different. Aspirin works with the body, so to speak, whereas other quote-unquote painkillers kind of work against it, even though they make you feel better. Nicotine. We didn't cover nicotine. Where does nicotine fall in the thermo diet?
Yeah, so nicotine, same thing, super pro-metabolic. Now, when you think about the term nicotine and niacinamide, B3, conitine, those are all in the N family, and they all support energy production. So niacinamide riboside, the N family is all supporting energy production. Now, when you see my post on Instagram and you see me, puffing on a Nicaraguan cigar, the nicotine is anti-estrogenic extremely. So same thing with niacinamide. A lot of people, you get on a coaching call like, hey, I want to lower my estrogen. Should I take some niacinamide? Well, yeah, B3 is great, but nicotine's like one carbon chain next. Nicotine's almost the same, just one little carbon chain. So when it comes to nicotine, it also anti-estrogenic. It brings down stress. It supports energy production. And then nicotine also supports peristaltic contractions. So again, yes, nicotine, highly anti-estrogenic because it's in the N family, and this whole N family supports energy production. And then a big thing that we don't talk about enough in the metabolic world is digestion. We should be passing 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. Now, what happens with people that don't pass them bowel movements, let's say 3, 4, or 5 days, you're trying to pass estrogen and junk from your diet. You want it out of there. Now, what happens at the 3-4 day mark, being constipated, you end up with estrogen reuptake, and then you're highly estrogen dominant. So we definitely want to support digestion. And when you think about the metabolic world and or people that have thyroid issues, low energy issues, the first thing to go when your thyroid goes is digestion. So, I don't want to recommend people chew on or puff on a Nicaraguan cigar like I do, but the first thing you want to do is it stimulates a bowel movement right away. And that's huge. When you're cleaning out that digestive tract, we talked about the raw carrot salad, kind of doing the same thing. Things like Cascara Sagrada, you're cleaning out that digestive tract. That's huge for health. And then a little bit into cigars. I guess I get my cigars from the Chapala Valley in Nicaragua. Now, when we think about these pro-metabolic foods, they're very mineral dense. Now, these cigars from this family, the guy who owns it, the main owner, he's 104 years old. He's had these valleys in his family for 1,500 years. So they don't do nothing to the oil. You're in this beautiful environment. The soil is beautiful. So you're actually getting minerals from, chewing on or puffing a cigar. And then you're also getting conitine. So back in the early 1930s, when you seen the men with top hats, when dinner was done, they'd stand up, excuse themselves. The men would, all right, ladies, it's time for brandy and a cigar. Well, they were doing that because they thought it was manly, but on a biochemistry level, it actually is manly. So what happens with the conitine, the special part about the conitine in the cigar, similar to nicotine, you get up in the morning and your hormone levels rise. That's why you've probably heard people say, take your testosterone test at 9 a.m. because your levels are going to be higher. Now at about midday, 2 o'clock, you send out an enzyme that downregulates DHT and testosterone. Well, if you chew on a cigar or puff a cigar that's high quality, no pesticides, mineral dense from South America, you will block that downregulation. So your testosterone DHT kind of spike even longer. So it actually was manly, 100 years ago where men were doing that and they didn't even know on a biochemical level. So yeah, I'm really big into nicotine. I've had several women that are dealing with like estrogen dominance and they just can't go to the bathroom. Their cold hands and feet, their estrogen so high. They're chewing on a high-end Nicaraguan cigar and just spitting out. It kind of sounds goofy. But if you're supporting peristaltic contractions and you're actually going to the bathroom, the benefits of that are tremendous. Let's say to somebody who's backed up, like going to the bathroom once every 5 days.
I didn't know that then. Nicotine can have, would you say, a laxative effect? Is that what you're to say?
It's not much of a laxative effect. Laxative is kind of like breaking it down and stuff because you're softening it. But a peristaltic contraction is just like supporting that regular movement. You're the flexing of the
a pro-digestive effect.
There you go. Yeah, pro-digestive, anti-estrogenic, pro-metabolic, pro-thyroid. Nicotine's awesome. It's just because the family that it's in. There's this one family. There's multiple families in the periodical table of elements, and you think of niacinamide. Everybody loves niacinamide in the metabolic world. Well, it's just one carbon chain off. So same thing with niacin and riboside. Nicotine's in the same family, and that's why it's doing these same beautiful things, because it's acting the same. So I'm very pro nicotine. When you think about a cigar, again, if you're gonna smoke a cigar, you puff it. Ray, Peat, and myself, I'm not a big fan of taxing the lungs. We shouldn't be inhaling smoke and exhaling it. Now, when you puff on a cigar, it just goes through your bloodstream. It doesn't tax the lungs. And or if you just chew on it, it's going right in your mouth. And then I have very nice white teeth. I don't have cavities, I don't have issues, and I chew on a cigar and have a coffee in the morning. It's very pro-metabolic. It helps with longevity, everything. I'm a big fan of nicotine. Again, not a Marlboro cigarette from the United States with 50 chemicals. If you gotta find a cigar source, from South America, high CO2 environment, high mineral environment, very pro-metabolic.
I was going to ask you about baking soda, as I said. Before I do, I just remembered something else I wanted to ask you. Sparkling water, is there a preference to consuming sparkling water over still under the thermo diet? I've heard some people talk about this, and what I assume if so, what I assume the mechanism is because obviously it's carbonated water, and Dr. Ray Peat was a big fan of increasing CO2 in the body. If you could just talk a bit about that. I know that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. But
Yeah.
if you could kind of talk about is sparkling water preferred under the thermo diet? Sorry, and is that because of the CO2 increase?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. So, and then there's also context to everything, like you said, a rabbit hole. Now, there are some sparkling waters that are high in fluoride. We don't want any kind of sparkling water that's high in fluoride. I think San Pellegrino started putting fluoride in like 6 months ago, and everybody was drinking that. So, when it comes to my preferred source of mineral water, sparkling water, I like Gerald Steiner mineral water. It's one of the highest quality in the world, and it's packed with CO2. Yes, we want to increase CO2 as much as we can, but it's also packed with calcium, and calcium fuels the thyroid. So without drinking milk, your thyroid's not working. We need a bunch of calcium. And then it also has magnesium bicarbonate, probably the best source of magnesium for us to consume. So when you consume a bunch of CO2, calcium, magnesium bicarbonate, we talked earlier about magnesium with energy production, ATP, cholesterol. And then we talked about calcium, improving thyroid and increasing CO2. So yes, I'm a big fan of mineral water as long as it's got the right minerals, and it doesn't have things like fluoride, chlorine, that kind of stuff. And then going a little further in the metabolic world, I don't really consume water at all. Like if I do, I'll do a Gerald Steiner on like a Friday, because the more water you consume that's not full of minerals, you're flushing the minerals. So if you're a guy at the gym, if you know anybody that's at the gym, they got that 2-gallon jug of water. They're actually peeing clear all day long, and when you pee clear, you flush your minerals. So your pee should be like a lemonade color. So this is why I don't consume, just plain distilled water ever. I do a lot of orange juice, a lot of milk, and when you think of orange juice and milk, they're very mineral dense. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Gerald Steiner. There's a couple other off brands and stuff, but just keep in mind if you're going to consume something like a distilled water, pinch of salt, something like that, some kind of electrolytes in there, to not flush the rest of your minerals.
And if I'm conscious that we don't want to go down into another rabbit hole, but you said the sparkling water, yeah, for many reasons, so long as the brand isn't putting fluoride into it, but it's got many benefits. CO2 is one of them. What's happening when we're having that carbonated beverage and we're increasing CO2 in the body?
Yeah, so every cell in your body has CO2 in it. And to give you a little context, when we eat food, metabolic food, you're in a good place, or just regular people. You eat food, goes through pyruvate dehydrogenase, and then you hit the Krebs cycle, and then the sugar turns an electron. Then you go through electron transport chain. Now that's kind of like your metabolism in a sense. Now at the end, you produce CO2. So high carbohydrates help your body produce high CO2. So the more CO2 in your body, the less stressed it is. So when you're drinking something like mineral water, or you're taking sodium bicarbonate and you're ramping up CO2, or you're doing vague breathing, or you're sitting at high elevation, you're skyrocketing your metabolism, you're skyrocketing thyroid hormone production, and you're lowering every stress response in your whole body. So CO2 is one of the end all be all things that we should concentrate on ramping up. This is another reason when you think of like the monks, you've seen people on YouTube where they're hanging from their neck and somebody's hitting them, and they're living at like 10,000 feet elevation. They can shut off their pain receptors because their mind's so advanced, because you're at that high CO2 level. So any of my clients in the past were like, hey, Jake, I got stage 3 cancer. What is the most heavy leverage thing I can do right now? Well, if you can go live above 4,000 feet, especially in a rainforest environment at that high, like Bolivia, you can restore energy metabolism, and that stuff will go away just from that high CO2. That's where Ray talks about like breathing, and Ray he even had a CO2 cartridge right by his desk the last 6 months of living. He was going, then other people in the metabolic community, you'll put like a garbage bag over you and pump the CO2 in. And Ray would do that because he lived in a cottage and it was cold in February in the United States in the mountains. As soon as he put that whole bag of CO2 around him, his feet would get warm. So CO2 is the most powerful thing in the world there is to, I guess, live longer, ramp up health, cure issues, that kind of stuff. We need CO2 and we need a ton of it. And when you think about keto, vegan, carnivore, you're not eating carbohydrates to produce your own CO2. So when we look at the overall picture of metabolic health, energy and structure are interdependent at every level. Now you think of somebody sick, stressed, keto, their energy level is terrible. Well, their structure is small and brittle too. Weak, brittle, small, sick. Now, when you think of somebody like me, high energy level, 210, 1,300 nanogram per deciliter testosterone, I put on muscle doing 1/10 of the workout other people do. And I've reached out to 10,000 people and helped them plus. So my energy and structure are massive. The structure goes beyond me. But without high cellular energy, you're not going to be that best version. And I'm trying to be non-authoritarian when I say that, because there are people that are successful and happy and stuff. They don't care about their health. But to be that best version of those people, you need that, energy and structure are interdependent at every level. So no micronutrient deficiencies, eating the right foods, eating the right amount of food, ramping up CO2, lowering estrogen, balancing your blood sugar. Everything we talked about today gets you that place where you're physically, mentally, emotionally at this super level that you've never been at before. And CO2 is the base of the whole metabolic health theory. Any way you can get it up, and then certain products, B1, methylene blue, aspirin, boost your CO2, progesterone, boost your CO2, eating more carbs, drinking mineral water, all those things improve your CO2. And the thing that does it the most is go above 4,000 feet elevation. Excuse me.
That's really interesting that you're proposing that part of the, what we would call, quote unquote, enlightenment that monks have is coming from the fact that these monks, Himalayan monks, wherever they may be in the world, living at very high altitudes. So part of their spiritual enlightenment is because their CO2 is so high. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, or I hadn't even heard of that before. One question that really is a challenging question, but I do think it's important to ask. I'm not sure if there is an answer to this. Obviously, Dr. Ray Peat passed a couple of years ago at this point. I can't remember off the top of my head how old he was. I think he was in his 70s. But I remember at the time, we didn't know why he died. We didn't know what the cause of death was. I do think it's important for people to know, for us to know, he was the guinea pig of his own prescription, which was the thermo diet. I do think it's important for us to know how old a figure like Ray Peat lived until, and what his cause of death was. Are those two things known? If so, what are they?
Yeah, it's not 100%, but I can give you my kind of rundown. So when it comes to Ray, when he was born, he had health issues right away. His parents had a bunch of health issues. So it wasn't in the 70s. He was 86. But still, you would think, hey, the guru of the metabolic lifestyle should have lived till he was 150. Well, Ray had all kinds of health problems. So I would argue that he probably should have died at 50 with all the health issues he had as a kid and through his genetics and stuff. So he always had health issues.
What kind of health problems were they? Do we know?
So there are all kinds of weird health problems he had, and then I guess a couple things we could touch on is like when Ray was trying all this stuff, when you think of like he wanted vitamin E, so he tried wheat germ oil. Well, he put wheat germ oil on his teeth and it melted his bottom teeth. You know what I mean? So he was like the pioneer of trying all these things. And then, you know, a lot of people and teachers and stuff say, well, Ray, you know, wasn't good at school or had ADHD, but he was just really a savant. And one of the main things that was bothering Ray, he was really happy and wanted to live in Eugene, Oregon. Now, for the last 30, 40 years, if anybody, you know, lives in Oregon, the main problem up there is the wildfires. You know, Canada all year round. So this was bothering Ray, and he just was too stubborn to leave. And I would have left. But this is the thing that really dampened, you know, his last 5 or 6 years of his health is inhaling the smoke over and over and over and over. And when you think about all these forest fires, let's say 10,000 years ago, you had a forest fire and the smoke would rise and it'd go away, right? Well, now there's aluminum, mercury, all this stuff all these toxins and poisons and stuff in the atmosphere. So what happens when you have a forest fire, it binds with all that stuff and it falls back down. So I have a client right now that lives in Perth, Australia, and she has this beautiful like 5-acre garden. They have this big rainwater reservoir where they get their water, and there's fires everywhere in Australia. And we couldn't find out what was bothering him. We got her really dialed in. She's a professional triathlete, so is her husband. Well, what happened was she didn't tell me about this rainwater reservoir, and I'll get back to the Ray Peat. So sorry if I'm going on a tangent, but she's in this like beautiful rainforest area of Australia. She's on the ocean, has a 30 generation 5-acre garden, the coolest foods and waterfalls, everything there. But she was drinking the rainwater. And you would think, hey, I'm in a rural Australia. The rainwater is great. She had such bad heavy metal poisoning from just the fires and the smoke binding with all the chemicals. So Ray was dealing with a lot of that in the later years of his life. And it was ongoing from the 70s to the, 2-3 years ago. It was really bothering him, and he didn't want to leave, and he should have. So those were kind of the main things that bothered him. And then there's other things that bothered Ray. But it's a really deep topic, but kind of getting back to my thoughts on what Ray did or where he's at or what's going on is on episode 13 of the Generative Energy Podcast with Georgie Dinkoff, Danny Roddy, and Ray, somebody asked Ray about consciousness. And Ray actually described what consciousness looks like in the brain. He said that it's similar to like the cosmos and like the neutrino seas of like the universe. You know, you have this gel-like matter in your brain, and it's constantly growing. And that's the same thing as like the neutrino seas or the universe. It's like endless. It's constantly slowly growing. And Ray said that, and he was talking about it. And Georgie's like, Ray, you just quoted Aristotle, 1700, or can't remember the time frame between Aristotle and Ray Peat. But Aristotle said the same thing when he described consciousness. And then through that episode of the podcast, they're talking about like high-end beings can basically just live. Their consciousness is connected to your atoms, the electrons, the neutrino seas, the atmosphere, the cosmos. So essentially, my thoughts on Ray is Georgie Dinkoff said Ray probably died of a broken heart. He's sick of the world. He's been helping, millions and millions of people forever, and it just keeps getting worse with all these weird problems. And he's just trying to help people. And Georgie argued that he died of a broken heart. And people also argue that Ray's still around. He's just in like the cosmos. When you think of like atoms, protons, neutrons, that kind of stuff, or a basic way to look at it is Dr. Xavier off X-Men. He was just such in his mind and such a deep consciousness. He was a psychic, so he just went to the next body. So Ray's argument from people in the past and living beings and that kind of stuff, at such a high energy state, you just kind of transform into the cosmos, but you're still there in your little atoms. So I get, that's my guess and theory of where Ray's at and why he died. Because when they did an autopsy, according to what I've heard, there was no cause of death. Then they had another company do it. So Ray basically, Georgie said it kind of made me tear jerk a little bit when Georgie's like, Ray died of a broken heart, and he kind of just left his consciousness, but he's still here.
So under the official autopsy,
yeah,
they didn't have an explainable cause of death.
No, there wasn't no, hey, suffocation from, secondhand smoke for 10 years. So it was nothing like that. There's no underlying cause. And I've heard Trudy talk, which is one of Ray's best friends. It's his neighbor. She was on Danny and Georgie, and she didn't give a cause either. She said they didn't find a cause. So it makes complete sense to me when, the there's a lot of spiritual thing, and people go into detail about, like, you know, we should kind of bring heaven on earth, and you should be like this super form, a super being, you know. And that's kind of what Ray did. He was at this super high level of consciousness, super high level of energy flow. It would make sense that he just still there but left his body. Kind of sounds goofy, but once you dive into like the Ray Peat lifestyle and his level of thinking and stuff,
I think that point's a matter of each individual's spirituality. Myself, I'm an incredibly spiritual person. My experience of this universe, this consciousness, is that it extends beyond the physical, beyond the mortal that we know as this human experience. So I do not doubt Ray Peat in, you know, whether it's his spirit, his energy, whether you want to break it down into the physics of atoms and neutrinos, as you said. Ray Peat is still with us. And even if you're not a spiritual person, Ray Peat is undeniably still with us through figures such as yourself, Jake, who are continuing to spread the word of the thermogenic diet, the thermo diet, continuing to help people. I think it's fair to say that a lot of what you've talked about today will be controversial, some more than others. And obviously that's going to be depending upon the spectrum of where people are, whether they're really kind of what their knowledge is on nutrition. If somebody's come to this and they've just come from, you know, listening to Lane Norton or James Smith talk about calories in versus calories out, this is all going to be very controversial to them, I would imagine. Some other people, some elements more than others. With that said, I would like to talk about my experience with the thermo diet principles. I don't currently eat under the thermo diet anymore, but for a time, and I wasn't even consciously thinking I'm going to follow the thermo diet, I'd kind of naturally come around to following it through absorbing information from many different sources. My experience of eating this under the thermo diet has been an incredibly beneficial one, and I've got to say, I think pretty much all of the protocols you've outlined under the thermogenic under the thermo diet here today, the ones that I've tried have been of great benefit to me. Is this diet going to be for everybody? I mean, the answer I would say is not necessarily, because I don't think any diet is going to be for everybody. I think that's clear. Like, I think there's a place for carnivore, there's a place for keto. You know, I have a little bit of resistance when I say there's a place for veganism, but you know what? We're talking about the spiritual. When it comes to people's holistic needs, there's a place for veganism as well. Diet is such a hotly contested topic, that we can really get lost in the weeds. But I think what's really important is that people do what works for them, that they're willing to experiment, willing to try different things. And I think for a lot of people that are feeling stressed, feeling down, they've tried other diets and it's just not working, I think trying the thermo diet, putting a focus on metabolic eating, could be incredibly beneficial for them. And with that said, Jake, if this has vibed with people, where can they go to find out more about your work and how you can help them?
Yeah, so you can check out my Instagram. It's just Jake Miner. There's a lot of metabolic posts, you know, everyday life stuff that I do. And then you can also go to onyxcoaching.me. That's going to be my website for the coaching program. And then I also have a Onyx Ray Peat inspired metabolic health Facebook group.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Jake. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything that you have.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.